So Charles Barkley did a interview recently, and he discussed and talked about how it's going to work when Inside the NBA relocates from TNT to ESPN. For those who've been living under a rock, I'll allow your boy to explain. TNT lost the rights to broadcast NBA games, and TNT, as far as the basketball coverage, was pretty much up in the air. There was talk about, breaking up this team. Ernie Johnson staying with TNT. Kenny Smith maybe going to NBA TV. Charles Barkley being discussed as possibly going to Fox Sports 1 or ESPN. And, Shaq is Shaq. Shaq can pretty much go anywhere. There was also talk that Shaq was possibly going to buy Inside the NBA and maybe just branch it onto his own brand. There was a lot of talk and rumors in the air, but ultimately, they found a home with ESPN. Inside the NBA will return next season, but under the ESPN umbrella. And if anyone's familiar with ESPN, it's owned by Disney. Disney is a squeaky clean organization. The things they were allowed to get away with over there at TNT, they're probably going to have to taper some of that, the language and the things they do over when they was over at TNT when they go to ESPN. Now, I don't think it's going to be subtle changes. I think the TV audience or the YouTube or the internet audience probably are not going to notice it, but it's going to be some subtle changes. Now, Charles Barkley also talked about how they're going to use him. Now, for those who've been living under a rock, Charles Barkley recently signed a 7-year deal with TNT to continue to do Inside the NBA. But he even said that he's not going to make it through 7 years. He probably wants to do maybe 2 or 3 years as far as doing television or with TNT. And then he's going to retire, out into the sunset. He's not doing this long term. So he basically said that to TNT when he signed the contract. And I think it was like 2 or 3 years ago, something like that. And now since ESPN has bought, it's going to bring Inside the NBA to their, brand, ESPN. There's been talk and chatter, the possibility how they're going to use these guys. Are they going to use these guys like, showcase them on other ESPN shows like maybe Get Up, First Take, maybe their NBA coverage as far as ESPN go. You're going to see these guys plastered everywhere. A lot of talk is they're just going to do the Inside the NBA portion. Occasionally, they may make appearances on those top-rated shows, but it's not going to be a day-in, daily thing where they're going to always have these guys on those shows. Now, I feel like out of the three, maybe Kenny Smith will probably do more appearances on a lot of these shows. Chuck is advanced in age. He really doesn't want to do all that. He just want to play golf, do Inside the NBA, and then play golf again. Somebody like Shaquille, he'll probably be the second one that will probably make some appearances. But Charles Barkley let it be known that he's not going to be entertaining that. There's been chatter about how they're going to do things once Inside the NBA is with ESPN. There have been conversations with Charles Barkley and his agent and the powers that be at ESPN, how they're going to utilize Charles Barkley. And when he talked about it in this recent interview, he didn't sound all that impressed with his conversations with ESPN. I think there's a mutual general understanding. They're going to basically respect Charles Barkley wishes. And ESPN is looking at it as, look, having Charles Barkley on those other shows. He may not do it a lot, but just having him sprinkled in on a couple of shows, or what he said on Inside the NBA, that should be good enough in the beginning. But we all know how ESPN is run. If you're successful, if you have an audience and people if you have a strong demand, people will want to see you on these telecasts. So there's going to be a balance between ESPN and Charles Barkley on that front. Now, Charles also alluded to he's not going to change. He's not going to do pretty much what the other people do at ESPN. Constantly talk about LeBron, constantly talk about the Los Angeles Lakers, constantly talk about the Golden State Warriors, Draymond Green, Steph Curry. He's not going to go into that circle of talking about the same old. Now, I do think if there's a story breaking out with those topics, he will entertain it, but he's not going to every 5 days a week talk about those same old topics, because Charles Barkley let it be known he's not going to do that. I do feel like ESPN understands and going to respect Charles Barkley's wishes. But I feel like that's going to be a balance where, and if you look at ESPN track record, they've been pretty consistent on successively handling personalities like this. Pat McAfee. A lot of people, the big talk and the chatter in the room was, Pat McAfee is, he really doesn't censor himself on his YouTube channel. He pretty much speaks his mind. He pretty much allow people that come onto his show to say whatever they want to say, i.e. Aaron Rodgers and LeBron James. And if you look at their track record with Pat McAfee, everything is going smoothly. In the beginning stages of Shannon Sharpe's recent accusations, ESPN is not like the old ESPN where they just kick you off. And they kind of allowed Shannon Sharpe to continue to do what he does best until this story gotten bigger and bigger, to where they made ultimately Shannon Sharpe chose to take some time off to handle this stuff. Now, he promised that he's going to come back when the NFL season starts. We'll have to wait and see how the second hand of that plays out. But, ESPN has been pretty consistent with these big personalities and allowing them to be what they are, and they kind of maneuver in the waters with them. Even with Shannon Sharpe and the alleged accidentally going on Instagram Live, ESPN handled that diplomatically. In ESPN's past, they would normally just get rid of you, but when you got cachet, when you got clout, and you got a bigger brand and a big name, they're going to take their time with you. So I feel like if you look at all those examples, I don't see no issues with ESPN and Charles Barkley. Now, there had also been talk that maybe ESPN will push somebody on Inside the NBA set, somebody, to give them some attention, give them a space, give them an audience. I don't think they're going to do that, because look at Pat McAfee. They didn't change who Pat McAfee has in his room. Look at Shannon Sharpe. They didn't change a thing with Shannon Sharpe. So I feel like that's going to be the same thing with Inside the NBA. That's their own IP. That's separate from all their other shows that ESPN has. They're just going to allow those guys to do whatever they want to do. And, having them at midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning, they can probably sneak under the FCC guidelines and rules and things of that nature. And they'll be a little bit colorful with their language, but they will check themselves. I think it will be subtle changes, things that are unnoticeable, but you won't see a real clear difference on these subtle changes. But yeah, that's, and another thing is, ESPN has relationships with the NBA. ESPN has relationship with NBA players. I don't think they're going to go all out and just talk down, talk about a player, or joke about a player consistently, religiously. like they were accustomed to at TNT. And if you look at the latter stages of TNT, they were pretty much off that boat anyway. Talking about players and how they look and how they play and things. Just joking around. If you've been watching them recently on TNT, they have toned that down. That not even with the Shaq and the Fool segment, where he would just ridicule and joke on players. And TNT got the memo that a lot of players did not like that, and they sort of toned that down. And like I said, when they go to ESPN, there are going to be changes. There are going to be subtle changes. You're not going to know any difference, and life will go. My thing is what they're going to do after 2 years or 3 years when Charles Barkley hangs it up. That gives ESPN a lot of time to figure out who's going to be Charles Barkley replacement. First and foremost, I don't think there's no one out there that can replace Charles, because Charles is very charismatic on TV. He's very entertaining. It's going to be a hard sell to get someone to replace Charles Barkley like that. Now, a lot of people feel like it may be Draymond Green. I think Draymond Green is entertaining and somewhat funny. I don't think he's on the level of a Charles Barkley, but just having him on the set, that'll be cool. Okay. So they'll have 3 years, maybe 2 to 3 years to figure out who's going to be Charles Barkley replacement. And is Ernie Johnson going to continue to do it? I do feel like Kenny Smith is going to continue to do it beyond 3 years. Not too sure about Shaq, because Shaq, hey, look, Shaq is almost a billionaire. Shaq really doesn't need inside the NBA. He has his own podcast. He's still doing his thing. But yeah, the future of inside the NBA could go from bad to worse within the next 2 to 3 years. But guys, tell me what you think. Rate, comment, subscribe. I'll see you guys in the next video. Deuces.